Cheech and Chong, Up in Smoke, technically not an 80s movie, but I'm pretty sure that most of us that grew up in the 80s grew up watching their movies, and Up in Smoke is actually not my favorite movie of theirs, but still a great one, definitely a classic, and I thought we would just start at the beginning and kind of work our way forward and eventually get to my favorite movie of theirs. So today we'll be checking out filming locations for the classic movie Up in Smoke. Let's go see what we can find. So this property right behind me, this used to be where the house was that was used as Tommy Chong's character's house, who was simply called Man. But there's not a lot to see here because, for one, the house is pretty well covered, and in the movie we don't really see the house too well anyways. We really just see the garage and then that long driveway that he's driving down. But on top of that, that original house burned down some time ago and it's been rebuilt. So yeah, not really too much to see here, but somewhere here was that long driveway that Man is driving down. I mean, the other thing is too, this property is so huge, there's like 3 driveways, so I don't even know, this could have been the driveway that Man is driving down. There's really no way to tell. I mean, down there is where I was just talking, and then this is another driveway, but like I said, somewhere here is that driveway that he's driving down. There's no way to tell exactly which one because the property's been rebuilt. So this right here, this was Pedro's house, and it's been fixed up quite a bit, but the structure of the house is still the same, you know, new paint job and definitely cleaned up quite a bit since the 80s. But luckily they haven't changed the structure much. Now we first see this house in the beginning of the movie when Pedro comes walking out the front door, and there would have been a man sitting on a toilet in the front yard, and then another man who I'm assuming someone that Pedro lives with, one of his relatives, comes over to talk to Pedro before he then heads across the street and gets into his car, Love Machine, which would have been parked right here. But that house that it's parked in front of, as you can see, is gone. It's been torn down, and we'll get to that in a second. This is the location where Pedro asks Man how he's driving, and Man responds, "I think we're parked." And that would have happened right over here. This whole area looks a bit different. It's a bit more developed. The sidewalk wouldn't have been here at the time, and this shopping center has definitely been remodeled since then. But the car would have basically been parked right in between this fire hydrant and this lamppost, and you can actually see a lamppost behind the car in the movie. Probably not the same lamppost since this area has been remodeled so much, but possibly in the same place. You can also see this store in the background behind them, but it's definitely changed a lot since then. Pedro's car would have been parked right here, and then they make a U-turn and they go into an empty lot right here. And we talked earlier about how the house that was across from Pedro's house got torn down. And actually when they came back to shoot that scene,
The house had been torn down in between when they shot the beginning scenes and when they came back to shoot that scene. So that's why later in the movie, when it has that shot of him making the U-turn, it's now an empty field. And they pull into the lot and they make a U-turn, and then they end up pulling up right in front of these houses. And they're actually stopped right in front of that house right there.
After going searching and finding nothing, Pedro remembers that his cousin Strawberry might be able to help him, so they stop to pay him a visit. We see the love machine turn onto his street, and the camera shoots through the front yard. Can't really do that anymore because the front of the house is covered by a bunch of bushes. They park on the side, and as they're walking up to the house, Pedro's telling Man to make sure he doesn't say anything about Strawberry's birthmark. As the camera shoots through the front yard, we can see this apartment building across the street, which is still there, it just no longer has the letters on it. Pedro and Strawberry take off and leave Man at the house, and then this happens. Meanwhile, the cops are sitting in a van that's parked right in front of this house, which is right across the street from the side of Strawberry's house. Strawberry and Pedro go for a ride on Strawberry's motorcycle, and we see them turning onto Carlotta Boulevard from Avenue 40, and this is just one street over from where Strawberry lives. We then see them turning off of Carlotta Boulevard, and this is where the motorcycle leans so much that the sidecar comes up off the ground with Pedro in it. They're now on Avenue 38, coming back up on Strawberry's house, so basically they just went around the block. All of a sudden, Strawberry starts to have a war flashback, and he decides to bail off the motorcycle, and he does that right here in front of this tree. After Strawberry bails, Pedro continues down the street in the sidecar. He rolls through Pasadena Avenue, and then right over the railroad tracks that used to be right here in front of me, and then crashes into that market. So he would have been coming down the street, coming right towards where I'm standing, goes over the railroad tracks, and then crashes into this market. Unfortunately, the payphone's no longer there. In the alley directly behind Pedro's house, this is where Pedro and Curtis are talking, and Curtis is trying to convince Pedro to buy the diamond. Pedro's car would have been parked right here in front of this fence. And then we get a shot looking down the alley when Curtis is scratching the windshield with the diamond. We probably get the best shot of Pedro's house when the immigration bus is parked out front and everybody's coming out of the house and getting on the bus so they can get a free ride down to TJ for Pedro's cousin's wedding. Now they did go all the way down to TJ for one quick scene in this intersection, but nothing here really looks the same. This was the scene where Pedro's talking on the payphone, which was a prop phone that they stuck on the wall with double-sided tape. And if you notice, throughout the scene, he's leaning up against the phone to keep it stuck to the wall, and that would have been right over here. Pedro and Man then head to the upholstery shop to pick up the van for Pedro's uncle, and believe it or not, that upholstery shop was located right here in Santa Monica. Of course, it was heavily dressed to make it look like an upholstery shop in TJ. They would have come around the corner right here, and at the time there was a wall right here, not sure if that was placed there for the movie or if it was actually there at the time. They walk right past this window that had some fabric hanging in it, and as you can see, the addresses have changed a bit. In the movie it was 1811, it's now 1815. As they get to about right here, they're talking about the burritos, and Pedro throws his on the ground right before a dog comes up and takes Man's burrito out of his hand. And right here, this would have been the entrance to the office of the upholstery shop. For the border crossing, they used an agriculture checkpoint in Winter Haven, California. And from Google Maps, we can see not a lot has changed here, but it is just a checkpoint, so I'm not really sure why a lot would change. Sergeant Stadenko and his men are now trailing the van, which is traveling down this road. And once they see a couple of girls hitchhiking on the freeway overpass, they cut across traffic so that they can get on the freeway. As they cut across traffic, Sergeant Stadenko continues down this road, going right underneath the freeway overpass where the two girls are hitchhiking. Sergeant Stadenko finally gets his car turned around and he's headed back towards the freeway. He tells one of the other officers to shoot out the tires, and he's obviously talking about the tires of the van, but the cop shoots out their tires instead, and they end up right over here in this patch of dirt. This is the old Lincoln Heights jail, which closed in the 60s, and since then it's been used in a ton of different movies. And right on the other side of that roll-up door was the lobby of the police station where they go to visit Gloria, and where Pedro and Man mess around with the police radio. Now, we don't ever actually see the outside of the police station, but when the camera's looking through the door, you can see a salvage yard across the street, which would have been located right over here. And as you can see, the salvage yard is no longer here, but that's the most we see of the outside of this building.
Right here in front of me, this is where the food stand used to be located, where they're hanging out getting some food, and the guy smells the smoke coming off of the van, and then he runs over to the food stand and he gets himself about 10 or 15 hot dogs. A couple of times in that scene, you can see this bridge right here. And then right behind the man when he's ordering the hot dogs, you can see this bridge and you can see the sign for Riverside Drive, which is right here. After Pedro and Man finish their hot dogs, they get in the van and they drive off that way down Riverside Drive, going over the bridge.
This is where the motorcycle cop was parked, and when he sees the van go by, he takes off after it. And when he does, on the right side you can see a 7-Eleven and a gas station, both of which are still there. And on that corner on the left side, you can see the famous Henry's Tacos, which unfortunately was forced to close down some years back. But the good news is, Henry's Tacos reopened just up the block. The cop finally catches up with them more than 8 miles in the other direction and ends up pulling him over right here. As he's approaching the van, you can see a bit of this park just past the utility pole. Make sure to keep your eye on that side view mirror for the shirtless guy who's watching them film. All of those scenes in the parking lot take place right in between these two buildings, the Rainbow Bar and Grill on my right side and the Roxy Theater on my left side. Right over here is where the van was parked, and it's kind of hard to tell because at the time this outdoor bar wasn't here, but in that scene you can see a couple of wooden posts in front of the van, and if we come over here, those wooden posts are still there. Right over here is where all the different bands were sitting down lined up against the wall, and in front of this door is where Pedro's band members were sitting. Once the show starts, Pedro starts noticing all the different styles that the bands have, so he starts working on a new song and he heads up to the dressing rooms to tell Man about it. Now that was filmed in the nearby Whiskey A Go Go dressing rooms, which are now used as booking offices. It's kind of hard to tell exactly where that took place because everything up here has been changed so much, but I'm pretty sure that right in front of this window where this desk is, that's where the couch was that Man's sitting on. I always thought this part of the movie was really cool, how they show a bunch of local LA punk and new wave bands. Now rumor has it, legendary LA punk band The Germs was one of the bands that came down to audition, but after they started a food fight, they were told they wouldn't be in the movie. But there's a scene in the parking lot where you can see one of the bands that definitely appears to be a young version of The Germs. Meanwhile, back inside the Roxy Theater, Rodney on the Rock stands right here on the stage and introduces Alice Bowie. And we see the band walk out of this door from the dressing rooms and up onto the stage to a not so welcoming crowd. Back outside in front of the Roxy, one of the Hare Krishnas that the cops took the outfits from gets up and tosses his cigarette into the gutter, which causes the van to catch on fire. Once the smoke from the van starts pouring through the vents of the club, everybody starts to loosen up and have a good time, and Pedro and Man and Alice Bowie end up winning over the crowd and having a great show, thus a happy ending to our movie.